Make an effort here to address something that was brought up but in the last video, a comment made by Jason Wong, who had made the original comment that inspired the video. He is saying, in the study of Bajur, if I'm saying that correctly, which is our prenatal formation, there is a forward flow and a backward flow of our luck cycle. So I'm assuming this is a feng shui type of discipline. For yang male and yin female, the flow is clockwise, forward, while for yin male and yang female, the flow is retrograde, anti-clockwise. So we're talking about the movement here in the prenatal. And I think at the beginning of every one of these videos, I should mention that if you are not familiar with this structure, as outlined in the original video, The Mystery of the Trigrams, then none of this is going to make any sense. So you got to get familiar with the basic language here, which is the trigram, the yin-yang lines, and then the two arrangements of those trigrams. So here we're talking about the prenatal just for now, and the question is whether or not there's a meaningful way of describing counterclockwise motion, because we went through the clockwise motion last time, and I said that because, and I made the mistake of saying because the sun goes around the earth. Of course, the sun doesn't go around the earth. Everyone knows that. I'm just saying that as a metaphor. It's the way it appears here on the earth. It's a useful metaphor, and that's what's being used here as a metaphor. So it's maybe less useful to say that the earth is rotating. So I'll acknowledge that now. I'll probably still say the sun going around because in essence what we're talking about are thought patterns. So it's all a big metaphor, right? We're seeing things going around and around. Whether we're spinning or they're going around us is to some extent irrelevant because it's a metaphor for cycles. It's a metaphor for cycles, for a repetitive phenomena. In some way or another, it's repeating. Like every day isn't the same, except in the sense that you have a certain period of darkness, a certain period of light. Over the course of a year, there's a variation, but basically, it's a repeating fundamental cycle. And so the mind goes through similar types of things. And it's more obvious for us, perhaps in the postnatal, what that mind cycle is, because it's a cycle that we're perhaps more familiar with, because it's based on what we want and rooted in sensation. But we can, and I did last time, describe what that motion around and around the, let's say, natural normal motion is. So what does it mean to go the opposite way? I've been thinking about it and something occurred to me, which I will show you here. This is a passage from a Philip K. Dick novel, Valis. At the end, he writes something called Tractates Cryptica Scriptura, which is referred to throughout the novel. And this is one of the sections. I'll read it for you. It's the one outlined here. The great secret known to Apollonius of Tyana, Paul of Tarsus, Simon Magus, Asclepius, Paracelsus, Bohème, and Bruno is that we are moving backward in time. The universe, in fact, is contracting into a unitary entity which is completing itself. Decay and disorder are seen by us in reverse as increasing. These healers learned to move forward in time, which is retrograde to us. So, to some extent, I haven't done the research to find out whether or not it's actually true that all of these historical thinkers believed that real time is moving in the opposite direction to how we perceive time, and that we are in some bizarre way moving backward in time. But I will take Philip K. Dick at his word for now and use this as a jumping off point to think about, well, wouldn't it make sense that if we're talking about a prenatal, in other words, not this world, that the movement of things would go in the opposite direction? But let's think about what that means. This is the model that we're working from. So, in the case of moving backwards, the past becomes the future, and the future becomes the past. So, in essence, the trigrams head in the opposite direction. They're inverted if time moves backwards, because the future would be at the beginning of what we consider to be the beginning now, which is, according to Philip K. Dick, conceived of as being a unitary entity, which kind of makes a lot of sense. Now, there are some interesting metaphysical questions to ask here, because if we're talking about time, and we're going to assume that it's a phenomena that actually exists, we really need to examine that closely. If we take as existing the same standard that we apply to the physical world, in the sense that it actually is, then time does not exist. Because past is not here. There is no tangible, real past as it was existing in the physical frame. And if there were, it would be a disaster, because it would mean that all events would pile on top of each other, and there would be an absolute confusion. It would be unmanageable. There is no way to conceive of a past that actually exists. And obviously the same is the case with the future. So what are we really talking about when we're talking about time? Well, we're talking about our minds, in essence. We're talking about a construction within the mind that is experiencing phenomena. And let's say the phenomena is happening in the present frame. It's always happening in the present frame. And from that, we derive a set of experiences, which we then analyze, turn into objects, and call, well, that's what happened, the past. Now, of course, those events actually did occur, but they didn't occur at the particular point of reference that we're constructing them in. In other words, the events from the past are not occurring now. They're occurring at the now that happened before. But once they've occurred, they're no longer happening. So the past is a construction of a mind. Similarly, the future. So if all of these things are happening within the mind, then what does it mean to say that time is moving one way or another? Isn't that just simply an attitude of the mind? Is there an actual inexorable movement of time inherent within the physical process, within the physical being of things? I don't know that that's the case. I don't see why it would be. Is it possible that the direction of time is determined by the mindset of the conscious beings experiencing the phenomena that's happening? I don't see why that necessarily would not be the case. So let's take a look at this, because something incredibly interesting happens here. So remember, now we're going to be moving backwards through this process. Or maybe it's forwards. If you take Philip K. Dick's claim as real, then of course this would be the true motion, would be counterclockwise. But for the purposes of our discussion, I'm going to say that this is I'll just say clockwise and counterclockwise. So if we go counterclockwise, something incredible happens, because remember, the top and bottom lines get reversed. Right? Here we have thunder. Thunder is future yang, yin in present and past. But if we're moving backwards, the future becomes the past. So in reality, this position would actually be mountain, and this position would actually be thunder. So, if we're moving counterclockwise, this is thunder. Water. Lake. Thunder, fire, lake, going clockwise. Thunder, water, lake, heaven, wind, fire, mountain. In other words, if we go backwards in time, the prenatal is exactly the same, except fire and water are in different positions. They switch positions. The water happens first. The fire happens on the way down if we're moving counterclockwise. This is really an incredibly interesting coincidence? Maybe not. What is it that the Taoists say? When we're caught in the postnatal, we have fire above, water below. I apologize to my dogs. The Taoists say that in order to correct for the imbalance that occurs when fire is above water, what we do is we reverse them. We take the fire, we put it down. We take the water, we bring it above. That creates the cauldron, right? That's exactly what happens if we go backwards in time in the prenatal. We're reversing the order within which we experience the water and the fire. I find this to be fascinating, a little bit mind-blowing, and I'm not sure what else to say about it except that thank you, Jason, for pressing the issue. There's something fascinating here. I don't know quite what it is, but I will go through it one more time. If we go clockwise, the ordinary motion following the metaphor of the sun's movement, rising in the east, right? Setting in the west, let's say, it's thunder, fire, lake, heaven, wind, water, mountain, earth. If we reverse, go counterclockwise, it's going to be rising on this side now. And because we're reversing time, what was the past is now the future. So this is thunder. Water. This is lake. Heaven, wind, fire, mountain. I realize that those of you who are watching what the words say, it's going to be reversed, obviously. I would have to do a little bit of programming to get it to reflect what I'm saying. Hopefully you're following what I'm saying. So that's amazing. That's amazing. It makes perfect sense. It's essentially the same pattern forward in time and backward in time, except fire and water are reversed. Absolutely mind-blowing, absolutely beautiful. Thank you so much for that question. If anything else occurs to me, I will make a video about it. If anyone else has any other questions, I'd love to hear them. If anyone would like to support this work, please go to patreon.com/TaijiReality. I think that will do it for now. Adios.